In the afternoon of day 3, I cycled across from Durham to Venray and north to Overloon. Now, the Coldstream Guards went effectively the opposite way, south from Overloon. I found this footage of them pressing into Overloon. Here's the Churchill tanks on their horizon. Infantry in support, these are likely going to be the Royal Norfolk Regiment. There doesn't seem to be too much concern, which suggests to me the footage is taken in the rear quarters near the HQ regiment. This is taken from behind a Churchill. We can see activity from the Churchill tanks moving forward. More Churchills on the horizon. There's a jeep bringing back injured personnel. These are German POWs. It's unbelievable seeing how young their faces are. Again, in German camouflage uniform. Look how young they are. On the horizon there's a US tank, a Sherman tank, that's been knocked out in late September when the US Army assaulted Overloon, trying to liberate the area. The Churchills were then later called in after the US tank attack had failed. This is the eye-level view of the front driver and the front gunner. You can see on the very left of the screen the periscope for the left-hand gunner. Infantry moving forward. Shovels, vitally important for the infantry to dig in. As soon as you reached an area, you would dig a foxhole to avoid the German artillery. Here we have the commander's view. This is the eyesight of the commander of the Churchill tank. Forward of the tank, we can see German POWs bringing back their wounded to be treated at the British lines. Some of these POWs are wearing Fallschirmjäger uniforms. This would be the German paratroopers who are clearly operating in the area. We can see now these are the Churchill tanks poised, ready to move on into Overloon. And here I had the opportunity to cycle through those very fields. They were pancake flat, dry as a bone as well. So great cycling area, but yeah, open fields is a tough place to fight in tanks. Here we have a memorial to the Royal Norfolk Infantry Regiment who liberated the area alongside the Coldstream Guards and the 6th Guards Tank Brigade. Now I made it to Overloon, and of course in the War Museum there, a Dutch museum isn't complete without some bicycles. Here we have a collection of bicycles showing the weaponry that would have been carried. In those days, bicycles were absolute key to getting around as an army. We can see here as well on these last two, the Panzer Schreck and the Panzer Faust strapped to the bicycles. These were the lethal devices for the Coldstream Guards in their Churchill tanks. So I'm at the museum in Overloon. Behind me there's a Sherman. It looks like it's taken a bit of a beating. The turret is blown off. This is the Panther tank. By now, in early October, the Coldstream Guards had found one of these Panther tanks outside in a barn right by Overloon. And they nicknamed the Panther tank Cuckoo. It was fully operational, and they drove it around for quite some time until it broke down. That was the problem with these Panther tanks. They were highly engineered, serious bits of kit, introducing new technology that had never been seen before on the battlefield. The problem that brings is a lot of maintenance. You try something new, you inevitably have to fix it, repair it. The man hours taken to do that, the training taken for the ground crew to learn how to do that, and the spares required was phenomenal. Whereas the Sherman tanks, far more vulnerable. far more reliable, easy to fix in the field. They'd be taken away off the battlefield, fixed up, they'd be back in action in no time at all. Panther tanks clearly left in a barn, where the Coldstream Guards, as I said, picked one up and used it for some time. Panther, you can see how low this is compared to the Panther tank you can see in the background there. Now, the chap stood next to it is almost taller than it. He looks a jolly little chap, but there we are. There's an array here of anti-tank guns as well. All of these were phenomenal. Real formidable pieces of kit and would seriously do damage to British armour. These are the various iterations of the Panzerfaust. There's also a Panzerschreck, but this is the anti-tank weapon that I was talking about. These are absolutely lethal. You can see how easily they are to carry. They're really easy to use. You don't need a lot of training or direction. And like I said, you can hide in a ditch very easily. Even, you know, they were using 14, 15-year-olds in the German army by now to hide in ditches, pop up right next to a tank, and these would brew up a tank, as he said. Brew up is effectively take the tank out. You're looking at casualties within the tank. They'd be lucky to survive. Here we have it. This is the Jackal. It's the Churchill. It fought here in the Overloon area, and it was taken out by anti-tank mine. The note beside the tank says Bob Dare dragged some of the crewmen out. You can see here crush damage to the underside. That's completely gone. Unfortunately, two in the turret, two crewmen in the turret passed away from their injuries. It's incredible to see these Churchills here, fantastically well preserved by the museum. You get a feeling for how they thundered across the country, and again, they're so close to each other. You've got the Churchill here, you've got the Panther, its arch nemesis, across there, and you can see the height difference. The Churchill was a low machine, it was designed for infantry support. It has really wide tracks. It's slow, it's really slow, but the frontal armour is probably the best the Allies have. It will take some rounds to the front. As I said, recently in October 44, the Regal mines were being introduced by the Germans, and this was a bar mine. It was a bar mine that was absolutely lethal to tanks. Any under armour on the tanks simply couldn't cope with the percussive pressure of the Regal mine. Now you can see on the sides here there's tank tracks being welded to the sides of the turret. Quite often they were welded to the sides of the tank as well. And it's noted that when they first landed in Normandy and they were sat in that field in Bayeux, the commanders met up with other commanders of tank regiments who had already been fighting in the region. And as soon as they came back, they ordered that tank links be welded to the side of the armour plating. The reason being, German firepower was just going straight through the Sherman tanks that were already in the region, and the Churchills didn't want to take any risks at all. As it turns out, scientifically, the mindset these days is it did very little. I've seen one or two hints that they kind of knew it didn't do much at all. If anything, it slowed down the ability of the turret to rotate quickly, so it could even have hampered. And it certainly gave more weight. You know, these engines are not massive, you know, they're big in size, but they don't deliver a hell of a lot of power. You've got to think it's not that long since engines were developed in the first place. Big heavy engines like that were a new thing, so to expect that engine to cope with additional tank tracks, these things weigh an absolute ton. Each link weighs, it's incredible. You can't lift a link up, it's that heavy. So you start draping these all over the tank, yeah, it's just too much for the engine to cope with. So it slows the tank down, it slows the turret ability to swivel, and obviously you have to swivel the turret in order to find the target and shoot. So it was purely psychological. They felt better about themselves in a tank with these tracks on. It's questionable whether it made any difference. Wow, look at this. A collection of radios. What would Don have made of this? He'd have been right at home with these. He'd have been trained up on how to use specific ones of these. I'm guessing not all of them. That's a bit much, but wow, this is phenomenal. This is kit. This was state-of-the-art kit. They were still breaking ground. Communication was key. To be able to communicate between tanks, that was a completely new thing. There was no phones even in villages, in towns. The phone box was, a brand new thing. So to be able to radio one tank to another, from one tank back to HQ, that was absolutely groundbreaking stuff. Yeah, this whole wall here is radios, and it's phenomenal. What would Don have made of this? I've come back to the Panther on the way out. I can't help but feel, imagine being the guys in the Shermans, in the Churchill tanks, when perhaps they've taken one of these out, or there is documentation of there were some broken down in Normandy and they were trying to find enough parts to get 2 or 3 going. Imagine having a look inside. Just standing next to it, it looks far more modern. It looks like a modern tank, whereas compared to the Churchill, compared to the Sherman, they look totally outdated to these things. And I know people go on about kind of Panzer envy and Panzer fear, but just being a human being in a Churchill tank, going to war, going to battle, when you see something that's to the naked eye looks superior, it on the battlefield, that is superior to British armour. There's no way that you wouldn't be in awe of these and you'd be scared to bloody hell and back, I'd imagine. That's the human reaction. It is phenomenal. Maybe they break down a lot. Maybe they need a lot of repairs. Maybe they cost a fortune to build. Maybe they're highly technical and therefore you need super technical guys to fix them. That doesn't help you when you're facing one. You're sat in a Churchill and this thing rocks up. That doesn't help you at all. If this thing gets to the ground, you're in trouble.